Hi, today let's tell you about 5 myths about vaccinations. The World Health Organization declares that one of the 10 biggest health threats in 2019 was avoiding vaccination. In France alone, more than a third of people believe that scientifically tested and validated vaccines are not safe. Experts estimate that the benefits of questionable vaccines will increase in the next 3 years. Thus, it may be necessary to tighten requirements for those who refuse to vaccinate children. However, to avoid this, doctors and scientists are trying to educate the public by spreading myths about vaccines and their perceived dangers. Myth 1. Vaccines cannot protect against disease. Vaccination is one of the cheapest and definitely the most effective ways to prevent some deadly diseases. It is estimated that mass vaccination can save up to 3 million people a year. Lives around the world. According to the WHO, vaccination would reach all the most remote and poorest parts of the world, saving an additional 1.5 million lives. Vaccines alone have almost completely eradicated infectious diseases such as polio, diphtheria or measles. Vaccines also help prevent chickenpox and effectively reduce the risk of possible complications of this contagious disease. Chickenpox is especially dangerous for pregnant and adult men. Unfortunately, diseases known only to most from textbooks can become a new huge threat. It is estimated that approximately 15% of school-going children in the United States are currently not vaccinated against major communicable diseases. And a quarter have not received vaccines against so-called childhood diseases such as chickenpox or extremely dangerous meningococcal infections. Scientists are increasingly talking about the fact that mass vaccination avoidance can bring humanity back to a situation where in a short period of 5 to 7 years, a large proportion of children died before the age of 3 to 5 years. Threats lurked in adults as well. After all, the main communicable diseases in the adult body cause the most severe complications, often resulting in death. The reasons why people do not decide whether or not to get vaccinated are varied. It is estimated that about 30% of the world's population abstains from one or more vaccines due to a simple lack of information, and some refuse because of religious beliefs. Myth 2. Vaccines cause autism. Doctors and scientists are shaking their heads when analyzing the current situation, as it is really difficult to understand what encourages people who are educated and wealthy to distrust vaccines. It was expected that in 2018 to 2019, an outbreak of measles will encourage people to be vaccinated not only against this but also against other communicable diseases. In small states, indeed, a higher need for vaccinations has been observed. Elsewhere, however, vaccination rates not only did not increase, but even decreased. Strange as it may seem, one of the main reasons why the desired result was not achieved was the dissemination of information through social networks. It turns out people supported the measles epidemic with fake news, but there were only a few of them. Others had deliberately chosen not to vaccinate themselves and not to vaccinate children in any way. 2019 researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, USA, published their study in Vaccine magazine in March. They sought to find out what arguments and what information are being posted on social networks by those calling for a complete abandonment of vaccinations. The main argument is that vaccinations cause autism in children. This idea was introduced in 1998. Published by British gastroenterologist Andrew Wakefield. He claimed that the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine, MMR, is the leading cause of autism. Only 12 children participated in a Wakefield study, and no researcher subsequently was able to confirm or repeat the findings of his study. The pioneer of the anti-vaccine movement was later disqualified from practicing medicine. After all, it was found out that the doctor received direct financial benefits by publishing such information. Myth 3. Vaccines contain live viruses and animal DNA. Vaccines are developed only according to approved and safe methodologies. However, most refusers to vaccinate believe that the vaccine itself can make you sick. Scientists call this a misunderstanding. In fact, the vaccine usually contains pathogens, but they cannot multiply in the human body and infect human cells. They only mimic the real pathogens and teach the immune system to recognize them. The vaccinated person produces B and T lymphocytes, which recognize the structures of bacteria or viruses. While the immune response is developing, the vaccinated person may experience certain symptoms, sometimes mistaken for an infectious disease, redness, swelling, or fever at the injection site. After this stage of readiness, T and B lymphocytes turn into so-called memory cells, which persist for decades and are rapidly mobilized when confronted with the real pathogen. Thus, perhaps the most important thing in developing safe vaccines is to treat, inactivate, bacteria and viruses in such a way that they do not cause infection but are similar to the real pathogens. And effective technologies have been developed for this. However, the pathogens used for vaccinations need to be grown up somehow. Yeast or a synthetic medium may be used for this purpose. A very small proportion of such pathogens can be grown in eggs or in cells taken from animals, usually mice. There is no point in fearing this, because before these pathogens are used to make vaccines, they are treated in such a way that they cannot bind to human cells, but only mimic their attack. Therefore, fragments of foreign DNA cannot enter the vaccinated human cells. Myth 4. Vaccines contain dangerous metals. The other ingredient in the vaccine, which is said to be harmful to the human body, is aluminum. It can actually be found in officially published descriptions of many vaccines. It is used to boost the immune response and a lower dose of the vaccine should be given. People for some reason consider this element as toxic as mercury. This is the wrong approach. Because aluminum is the third most common element on Earth. Some of it enters the body every time you eat an apple, carrot or a handful of nuts. It is estimated that an average of 7 to 9 milligrams of aluminum enters the human gastrointestinal tract per day. It does not harm young children either. Because with breast milk alone, a baby receives about 7 milligrams of aluminum per day. With baby food, a child can get up to 40 milligrams of aluminum in half a year. Here, the total amount of aluminum obtained by vaccination is just 4 milligrams. The unfounded fear of aluminum came not just to himself. It was also inspired by the infamous A. Wakefield. He tried to show that 2 weeks after vaccination, children had indigestion due to aluminum. The unpleasant symptoms experienced by vaccinated children were reported by parents, who sued the pharmaceutical company to profit from the alleged harm. Eventually, this story became a hugely popular myth that scientists had a hard time fighting. They try to explain that aluminum hydroxide is in some vaccines, but by no means all. This element is needed when vaccinated against meningococcus, tetanus, pertussis, and vaccines contain elements of decontaminated bacteria. It is just an excipient and its amount is so small that it can have no effect on well-being or health. Myth 5. Vaccination makes no sense because many communicable diseases do not exist. Mass vaccination has indeed made it possible to reduce the incidence of some communicable diseases. However, this does not mean that the disease does not exist. Children are vaccinated against 12 infections: tuberculosis, hepatitis B, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, poliomyelitis, Haemophilus influenza type B infection, measles, mumps, rubella, pneumococcal infection and human papillomavirus infection. However, in non-EU countries, some people do not receive vaccines against these diseases. Thus, an unvaccinated person who leaves a relatively safe area is at risk of infection. Another important reason for vaccination is that there are those who cannot be vaccinated, for example, due to a severe allergy to the components of the vaccine. And there is also a small percentage of people who do not respond to the vaccines. They are susceptible to disease and the only hope for protection is the fact that those around them have immunity and cannot transmit diseases to them. The success of a vaccination program, like that of society itself, depends on the cooperation of each member of society for the benefit of all members of society. The same principle applies here as for traffic rules. On the road, everyone protects themselves and tries not to harm other road users. In addition, the World Health Organization recalls that in 2018 to 2019, outbreaks of rubella and measles have been reported in Europe and the United States. Interesting. 2019 in March, the Danish Statens Serum Institute, a research institute in the Annals of Internal Medicine, published an analysis of hundreds of thousands of children born between 1999 and 2010. Health, and reaffirmed that the MMR vaccine has nothing to do with autism. For 5 years in a row, the WHO has been recommending that people in the countries be kept informed about the benefits of vaccines. However, it is clear that information dissemination alone is not enough. Some states have made the decision to simply not allow parents to choose whether or not to vaccinate their children. Last year, Italy passed a law that children can only be admitted to schools if their parents provide proof that they have been vaccinated. The same practice is followed in Australia. Many countries have a law that requires children to be vaccinated against 5 diseases: chickenpox, polio, measles, mumps, and rubella. In Italy, taking unvaccinated children to educational establishments carries a fine of up to €500. 48% of people refuse to vaccinate children after gathering information online. After reading just 3 articles about vaccine damage, you believe that you know better about vaccines than qualified doctors. Scientists call this the Dunning-Kruger effect. 2011 psychologist David Danning has identified and described the phenomenon when people with large knowledge gaps in a particular area are unable to notice their knowledge gaps and therefore feel competent in areas where they clearly lack competence. Thanks for listening. If you liked, click subscribe and like.